Let's go into the real origins of the Iran war.
Where does this hatred and venom come from? Uh, with respect to the United States, it's very simple. In 1953, Iran was a parliamentary democracy. Iran had not invaded or attacked another country for a century and a half. This was a peaceful country. It had been invaded several times, but it was a democracy that didn't threaten anybody, didn't want to threaten anybody, hadn't threatened anybody, hadn't invaded any place actually since the 1790s in a brawl over who controlled Basra. So, in other words, very esoteric things from the 1790s. But since then, Iran had been bothered, but had not bothered anybody else. And in 1953, the Iranian prime minister elected, respected, Prime Minister Mossadegh, had the audacity to say the thing never to be said by this region, which is,
What do you think that is? Take a guess.
I think the oil under our ground is Iranian, not British. And when he uttered that thought that maybe Iran's oil belonged to Iran, immediately the British Empire, in the form of MI6, came to the new ascendant American empire in the guise of the CIA and said, we got to overthrow this guy, which of course they did successfully. They made what today we would call a color revolution. They stirred up protests in the streets. They stirred up unrest, and Mossadegh was chased from power. And the United States installed what the Persian Empire would have called a satrapy, meaning that Iran became a kind of province of the American empire under ultimately CIA
rule. The embassy, the American embassy in Tehran, that's where we ran Iran from. It was basically we ran the whole country out of our embassy there. Everyone, that's not something people often say in the hostage crisis, is that all these people at the embassy, half of them were CIA operatives. Some of them were involved with the secret police and torturing people in Iran. And some of them were innocent, but a lot of them were very not innocent at that embassy.
Rule. And we put the Shah of Iran as the face of that empire, and the police organization, Savak, as the enforcers.
They were brutal. That's why there was the eventual revolution. The Savak, secret police, one of the most torture-happy, despicable secret police there's ever been.
That empire. That lasted 26 years. In 1979, as the Shah of Iran was dying of cancer, the people led a revolution, an uprising, and threw out Savak and the CIA and the Shah. And that's when Iran had its Islamic revolution and put in the government that is government until today. The United States hated that. When you're an empire, as we are, when you have protectorates, when you have places where you have your military, and in the case of Iran, when your major oil companies have investments there that suddenly are lost because what was stolen from Iran is now taken back by Iran, that led to a reputational question. We need to bring Iran back under our control because we're an empire. If we're too weak vis-a-vis any piece of our empire, it damages our...
It's sort of, we go after every and any country that is not beholden to us, the U.S. Dollar hegemony. It's if your country trying to put the best interests of its own citizens before the best interest of the U.S. empire, you're a target. We'll go after you, and we'll restore you and reduce your country to ruin.
A reputation. Anywhere, we need to punish these people for what they've done. And there was the hostage taking by the youth radical groups who said, we're doing this.
They made a museum out of that U.S. embassy they took over. And there's all these shredded documents from the CIA that they put back together. And you can download it. Documents recovered from a den of espionage. They were labeled, and they published them all. And yes, the embassy was a CIA base of operation that ran the country. And some of the hostages, of course, there were just regular workers there, but there was also people that trained the secret police on how to torture people. Those type of people were also at the embassy.
because we want the Shah to be brought back here to face a trial in Iran for the crimes of the police state.
Where search? I downloaded them a while ago. I think when they published them, they called it documents from U.S. Den of Espionage. Here we go. 77-volume collections comprised of classified documents captured in the 1979 during the takeover of the United States Embassy in Tehran. So it was the control center for our puppet state in Iran, the U.S. Embassy. They'd never mentioned that in when they talked about the hostages in Iran in mainstream media, surprisingly.
Over the last 23 years, and the United States had taken in the Shah in a very unwise decision by President Carter in 1979 for medical treatment, knowing that, suspecting it was going to lead to this kind of eruption. They demanded reparations. They demanded an apology. They demanded an end to the U.S. Subversion of Iran. All pretty reasonable, actually. But of course, it became the cause célèbre of the United States in 1979. And another humiliation for America, which an empire never tolerates. An empire needs to repay any kind of loss of face with some kind of extreme punishment, not only to get that particular recalcitrant place under control, but to signal to all the rest of the empire, don't you dare try this. So from 1980 onward, the U.S. has been at war with Iran in various ways. In 1980 onward, we paid, we armed, we supplied Saddam Hussein to invade Iran. A pretty sordid deal. Saddam Hussein used poison gas with American knowledge at the minimum, and according to some testimonies, American active support.
We apparently provided them the precursors to make the gas that Saddam Hussein used. And we did that when Saddam Hussein started losing the war. Just like in Ukraine, where they start doing more and more reckless provocations and more extreme stuff as Ukraine loses. In Iran, we gave Iraq chemical weapons and helped them. Saddam Hussein used them against the Iranian population.
But we engaged in a war in Iran through a proxy, through Iraq, from the very start of this 1979 government. Donald Trump, already back in 1980, said we have to overthrow this government. So when Trump gives his explanations for the current.
Trump, just like Asmongold, just like most normal people, they're heavily influenced by the propaganda put out by mainstream media. And he probably doesn't know that the U.S. Embassy was full of den of espionage and all these documents and how it was running the country. He doesn't know that. That's why he was probably after Iran, is anyone who just takes mainstream media as reporting at face value about Iran will come away that this is absolute evil that needs to be defeated.
War, he says, oh, nuclear or this or that. This is, these are convenient current explanations for something that has been on his mind for 46 years.
You know what? You can tell that he doesn't know the whole thing. You can say that for certain. I can say that about Trump because he doesn't restrain himself. He just speaks. He with all the interviews he does, all the talking he does, if anything that he knows that he will say at some point in time. And I've never heard him say certain things. That means he just doesn't know them. That's all. It's yeah. He's not good with the amount of he talks to the media. He's not keeping that many secrets.
As well, because the American empire suffered a slight. A country got out from under American CIA control, which you don't allow to happen. And from 1980, it's been nonstop war.
Yep.
It's been an economic war. What our Treasury Secretary, who I increasingly regard to be a thug, basically.
He is a thug. The Secretary of Treasury is the linchpin of the deep state. Secretary of Treasury is the one who controls the Exchange Stabilization Fund, from which all of the black budget of the CIA is run, from which controls basically the Federal Reserve and all its interventions in the market. The Secretary of Treasury is the deep state post. And of course, whoever is Secretary of Treasury is going to be a thug.
Not a Treasury Secretary, but someone who delights and gloats in crushing other economies by using financial means or trade sanctions or financial blockages and delights in it, explained in Davos this year in a Fox News interview with Maria Bartiromo.
ESF, well, it serves the people that are part of the that core group. The people, it did horrible things. It did MK Ultra. It did bribing politicians around the world. It wrecked the dollar at first, and it's about covering up that fact. Think of it like Madoff's Ponzi scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme, and Ponzi scheme always served just themselves in keeping the Ponzi scheme from collapsing, and everything has been about that. John F. Kennedy wanted to redo the international monetary system. That threatened the ESF and all its secrets, so he got a bullet in the head. That type of thing. Just think of people like Asmongold, how angry they are, and how they say all these people need to we need to unalive a lot of people. And yes, imagine what he will say when he learns the full truth. That's what they want to prevent, because they know they'll be lynched. Everyone involved with the Exchange Stabilization Fund will be hunted down and lynched when the full truth get exposed. And so that is their aim. That is really simply the number one aim, is to keep that from happening. The secondary aim is, of course, just profit and, might as well live luxuriously while you can. And so, yes, there's graph, but primary aim is keeping the U.S. hegemony, dollar hegemony alive, because once that falls, all eyes will turn to the government agency that was responsible for protecting the dollar, where all the dark, deep secrets are buried.
That our statecraft destroyed the Iranian economy last year. Well, we've been doing that kind of statecraft. What a horrible.
Oh, yeah. He's talking about how our current Secretary of Treasury bragged about collapsing the Iranian rial, Iran's currency, in an operation that started March of last year. That led to the protests, and it's just one more example of how we're trying to constantly attacking and undermining Iran.
Horrible Orwellian term for destroying another country's economy. We've been doing that for decades.
Well, there's been a lot of noise in the news lately, but none of it matters.
Okay.
Walmart are sortable.
In leaders, we have been
Have done all along.
And we have been engaged in assassinations of Iranian leaders. We have been engaged in blowing up their nuclear facilities, even when they have been pleading, let's have an agreement that puts us under strict supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency. We've been using what's called hybrid warfare, every possible means of subversion, of economic warfare, of direct military action, of covert operations. Donald Trump confirmed that in the protests last year, the U.S. sent weapons to the protesters.
Yes, U.S. and Mossad. So we wrecked their currency, causing people to come out and protest. Then we distributed weapons to those protesters. What could possibly go wrong? It's a pretty horrible thing to do to a country, isn't it? Cause protests and then hand out weapons to the protesters, and violence ensues.
It's not a protest. That's an insurrection we were creating that did not work. But the point I'm making is that we portray Iran as evil because it did something unacceptable to the United States that doesn't involve nuclear weapons or any of the specific issues or Hezbollah or Hamas. It goes back to 1979. They escaped from the American empire. They escaped from CIA control. That's not allowed. That's simply what you're not supposed to do.
Same thing for Russia. Russia, if you go back when Boris Yeltsin, when they were balkanizing and after Soviet Union collapsed and dividing it up into all these countries, the Soviet Union, and looting Russia's resources. Back then, Russia was the positive articles. I mean, Russia was basically under CIA control back then and being looted. Then Putin came into power, stopped the looting, restored order, and Russia's done very well since then. But Russia escaped CIA control. And so we've been anti-Russia ever since Putin came into power. Because how dare he try to have Russia, be a sovereign country?
And this war has been going on with various pretexts, various explanations since then.
Let me ask you,
if I could just say one more thing, Tucker. Trump's main argument has been in the last months, I will stop them from having a nuclear weapon. Of course, anyone that knows the history of this knows that this is Orwell to the nth power. By that, I mean such bizarre propaganda, you don't quite even know where to start. The
Yep.
reason is that the Iranians have not pursued a nuclear weapon. Our own intelligence agencies have said that repeatedly. What they have pursued, though, is a treaty with the UN Security Council to confirm that, to put them under strict monitoring under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but in return for ending the U.S. economic warfare on Iran. What Iran has wanted for 15 years is you supervise us, you control us, fine, but lift your sanctions. Let us breathe. Let us have a normal economy. Let us trade. And President Obama, and by the way, one other thing, let us have our own money back because the United States has confiscated tens of billions of dollars of Iran's money, not our money, because we do that as an empire.
Yes, we do that. And there's been stories going around that the UAE, it just dropped out of OPEC. And one reason for that is because they want, once the Strait of Hormuz opens up, to sell as much oil as possible because they're in financial trouble. Why, with all these billions and billions and billions in U.S. assets in America, is the UAE in financial trouble? Well, that is because they can't sell those assets. That's not okay. Part of their deal with America behind the scenes is they'll park them in the United States and never take it out. They have this undemocratic regime that we prop up in the Middle East. They sell oil in dollars, then vast majority of the money they put into the United States, and they're never allowed to take it out. It's theirs in name only. It's really just their tribute payment basically to the United States for propping them up. And what the part of the oil, of course, they can't keep for themselves, basically are bribed to them to keep doing the system. That's how the Middle East works. These countries in the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, UAE, they're not allowed to sell their reserves. If they did, we'd find some excuse to shut it. If they tried, we'd shut that down immediately. We'd pressure them. If that didn't work, we'd just come out with some excuse, and we could freeze their assets. Any other things. We can't allow any one of our vassal states to start selling billions and billions in treasuries. That would hurt us. No, they can't. They're vassal states, puppets.
Freeze the money of other countries. We sometimes just overtly take it and use it for something else. It's rather obnoxious to my point of view, and rather self-defeating in the long term for the United States to have the reputation that it just steals other people's fiscal and financial resources. But
yet that's what we do. We do it openly for our adversaries that the media can portray as enemies, like Iran, Russia, where they can just seize the assets, and because we convince the people, citizens of the United States and Europe, that Russia and Iran are evil, so we can take their money. But for our supposed allies, that's a lot more quiet. And we don't actually openly say, yeah, Saudi Arabia puts all its money in the United States and they don't own that money anymore, basically. No, we pretend that Saudi Arabia is this really rich country and prosperous country because of their alliance with the United States. It's ridiculous.
We did that with Iran. So what Iran has wanted is diplomacy. And I come back again. They're nice people. They're diplomats. And I sometimes tell them, you don't even know who you're dealing with here, how nasty this is, how difficult this is. No. We want an agreement, Professor Sachs. Do you know who we might speak to about negotiations and so forth? Very civilized, very nice people. In 2015, such an agreement was reached. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. It was reached not only with the United States, but with Britain, with France, with Russia, with China, and with Germany. The 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council plus Germany, called 5+1. Then it went to the UN Security Council, where it was unanimously backed. Then came the Zionist lobby in the United States. Oh, no, you can't have an agreement with Iran. They're the evil empire. You can't do this. And so when Trump was elected in the first term, he ripped up the JCPOA.
He did.
This is the approach.
And that was a big mistake for him. That's one one of the pillars they used in their strategy to force him into war with Iran is that in the negotiations, he had to come up with something that was so much better than what Obama came up with. That I mean, look, think of it this way: if he rips up this agreement with Obama, then he goes to war, wastes all this billions of dollars of assets, all these billions of dollars, moving all these aircraft carriers into the region to threaten Iran, and then all he gets is an agreement that's the same as Obama. That makes him look like a complete idiot, a fool. And so he had to come up with something that was much, much better than Obama's deal. So much better that Iran couldn't deliver on that type of insane. They'd have to agree to limit their ballistic missiles too, and do all compromises they weren't willing to do. And so he was basically trapped. There was no way for him to diplomatically get himself out of it, because the agreement that he ripped up, Obama's agreement, was a pretty good agreement, and coming up with something that was miles better with that was impossible.
That you don't want them to have a nuclear weapon when you had the control? No, this is the opposite. This is, we need to change the regime because they humiliated the United States by escaping from our empire. We tried to defeat them in many ways, but they stood up to it. We need to defeat them. There's an Israeli version, which is not exactly the same. And the Israeli version is, we need to have absolute control over the Middle East so that we can pursue our greater Israel agenda. This is not exactly the U.S. cause, but there are people in the U.S. that are the backers of that distinct cause. That's not Israel saying you escape from the American empire. That's Israel saying we control almost all of the Middle East militarily, but Iran we don't yet control. So that's the last big prize. And that's the other part.
Yeah, countries with U.S. military bases are basically under Israeli control. They're under U.S. control. And with Israel's influence over the United States, they are under Israeli control. So Iran was the last big one that was left that wasn't a U.S. vassal state and could threaten Israel. So that's why they absolutely wanted this Iran war.
Part of this agenda right now, and why Israel is even more against the off-ramp than the United States. Trump is against the off-ramp because he can't declare victory, because he would lose face, because he'd face pressure groups, because there are...
No, it would be political suicide for him, because he's wasted so much money on this Iran war, so many military resources, like interceptor missiles, standoff precision missiles. All our bases across the Middle East have been leveled. It's a disaster. And there's economic damage that is starting now, just starting in the United States. It's going to get, even if the conflict ended now, you'd have a very rough summer. And the conflict isn't going to end now. And in order to sell, he needs a victory. The only thing, he needs something that to show it was worth all this pain and all this high price. And if he doesn't get a victory, if he gets lost, then it's just like, American people, what the fuck? We wasted all this resource, this money, that we're having all this economic pain, high gas prices, and then we lose to Iran? I mean, what the fuck? This was a disaster. And that's what Trump wants to avoid. He can't. That's the ultimate outcome. He's just delaying the inevitable right now by still going around claiming that we're winning.
We have the Israel, or the Zionist lobby, I would call it, in the United States. For Israel, the issue is somewhat distinct, but Israel's main issue is that it wants complete military dominance of West Asia and the Middle East, and even into the Horn of Africa and North Africa. And it almost has that. Not that it can easily control all of the territory, no, by no means, but it is able to act with impunity. It's able to invade.
It can bomb wherever it wants, whenever it wants. That's what it wants. Like when Assad in Syria, the Assad regime was overthrown by the Mossad proxies, the former ISIS. Do you know what first thing Israel did? It went in and bombed every military site in Syria, so that Syria did not have any capacity to defend itself in the future from Israel. That's the first thing it did. That's what it's done. A failed state, a state which is in the middle of a civil war, that's completely unstable. That's the Israel can just go in and bomb whenever it wants. It has basically controls that state. So it wants either U.S. vassals like Saudi Arabia and UAE places that have U.S. bases, or failed states around it. Like that, it basically has complete control.
Lebanon, it's able to occupy Syria. It's able to overthrow.
Oh, yeah, sorry. That's another thing it did right after the Assad regime collapsed. It went in and seized a whole bunch of land in southern Lebanon. Right here on the map. You see, this is Israel right here. See this? Actually, it's in orange right now. Someone has put that in. That is the area that Israel immediately took from Syria. This is Syria. Right after Assad regime collapsed, it went in and seized all this land and just took it. That's what it wants. It wants to just be able and, okay, let's take some more land here. Now they're trying to get all the land in southern Lebanon with their latest offensive against Hezbollah, trying to take the land here. Israel is just hungry for more land. It has the Greater Israel Project. And this is just start. Netanyahu, if he had his way, he'd take this land, build settlements there. Then once that's also take more land, maybe from Syria or even at some point Saudi Arabia. The Greater Israel Project is from this river right here. See this river to this river over here. That's all the area that Israel wants as part of the Greater Israel. It's basically this chunk right here. Funnily, Iran is practically the only country in the Middle East that doesn't have any land that's part of the Greater Israel, but it's still, Israel views it as an obstacle.
Other countries, governments, and that's what it wants. But it faces an obstacle, and the obstacle is Iran.
So most people don't wake up in the morning and decide, won't move any men entry and flow. And that's explains with targeted support. Use the code Tucker.
Israel,
20% off supplements. Join Blokes. Get your edge back.
Israel, 30 years ago this year, when Netanyahu first became prime minister, adopted a strategy that was explained in a public paper called the Clean Break Strategy. And the Clean Break Strategy said, we will never accept, we being our new government, never accept a state of Palestine. We will occupy all of what had been the British Palestine, British mandatory Palestine. In other words, we'll control Gaza, we'll control the West Bank, we'll control all of Jerusalem, and we may control other places as well.
Yes.
We'll never do that, but we'll face resistance when we make that claim and hold on to this territory. We'll definitely face resistance. We'll definitely face resistance of militant groups. But what Netanyahu and his colleagues in the United States said was, rather than fighting those militant groups directly, we need to bring down the governments in the Middle East and West Asia that support those groups. And that is what's called the Clean Break Strategy. The Clean Break was the clean break from the peace accords, from the land for peace idea that Israel would return to its borders, there would be a Palestinian state in return for peace. That's what international law says. But what Israel says is we're never returning. There's never going to be a state of Palestine. In fact, we're going to have what we call Greater Israel, which is all of Palestine, including Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem, legal Israel, but also expanded parts of the region. And when you...
what I'm thinking right now, just thinking as talking is, what's the future of Israel after the United States cuts off its support? And Netanyahu has done such evil behind the scenes in the name of Greater Israel. And can Israel as a country survive the ramifications, the karma from that, the death and destruction it's caused? I think he's going to go into it more now.
Interviewed Ambassador Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel. He put it very clearly that the great zealots, including Huckabee, and many of the Israeli leaders view Greater Israel as control from
What I mean by that is if Israel for decades has behaved like monsters, do they even deserve to have a state in the Middle East? And just one example is the genocide of 1 million Christians in Syria. that Israel was in big part behind.
Big slice of Egypt, all the way to Iraq, from what is taken to be even a biblical gift of God to the ancient Israelites, from the river of Egypt to the great river of Mesopotamia, meaning the Euphrates River. So Israel wants military dominance. The clean break idea was, when we aim for that, we'll find resistance. We don't fight and extinguish the militant groups because we can't. We have to fight the governments that back them. And that's where the idea of perpetual war in the Middle East came from, or not perpetual war.
Its idea basically is, it's not just with regard to the Palestinians. Like, for example, when it goes into Syria and takes this land here, the people here might be upset at having their land stolen, and they might want to fight back. But without state backing them, without like Iran, other governments providing weapon and support to these groups for fighting Israel, their ability to fight back will be ineffective. So Israel can just take this land from Lebanon, take more land from Syria, take more from Lebanon, take some from Saudi Arabia, and take some Egypt. That if you don't, and when it takes land from Syria and Egypt, they'll be able to use the United States to pressure those vassal states to give it up. That's, I think, the idea of Israel and how it wants to create the grid of Israel. It's not going to work. It did too much public opinions turned too much against Israel in the world and in the United States for that to happen. But that was Netanyahu's plan. And the plan was put into place back when U.S. propaganda arm, the media, still had huge influence over the world, and they thought they could just hide everything they were doing and justify all the land they took over. But no, with the collapse of trust in mainstream media, plan for Greater Israel is shot.
But actually, specifically, 7 wars were designated that would overthrow governments supporting Palestinian militancy. And those governments were Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And we've now been pulled into Israel's 7 wars. 6 of those wars have led to
all of those places. The first 6 where Israel has gone its way are disaster areas, and that thousands and thousands died in all of them. Like Iraq's probably one people know best, and because a lot of U.S. soldiers ended up dying there too. But Syria and the genocide of Christians there, Libya, all of them are disaster. Just look into any one of them and you'll find tragedies. Compared to before the United States Israel started intervention in the country and after, it's just so much death and destruction. And that's what I mean about karma. Can the karma Israel accumulated by all this evil it's done throughout the world, can it really survive that karma when it comes back to haunt them?
To bloodbaths and disasters, from Libya still in civil war, Sudan unbelievably in 2 civil wars because we broke the country.
Oh, Sudan! I've watched a video on that last year. I did that time. Wasn't really thinking. Sudan is pretty far from. It's not directly near Israel. It's like right south of Sudan, right here. It's here. It's huge country. But I wasn't thinking of it when I watched the video. It's disaster, the civil war here. So many dead and country broken up. Yeah, but so it's part of Israel's grand ambition. The only countries that have been spared this so far are the countries that have U.S. bases and have allowed themselves to become U.S. puppet states and let themselves be slowly looted of all their natural resources. Because that's what we're doing, basically, to Saudi Arabia. I mean, people might say, oh, well, Saudi royal family has all these billions in the United States that they're profiting from. No, those billions aren't under Saudi control. They can't just sell them whenever they want. They can't. They're our puppets.
Part, and each of those 2 parts now has its own civil war. Somalia, there's not even a government. There is a government, actually, very nice prime minister that I know, but barely governance in the country. Lebanon, we see it's invaded.
Oh yeah, from the United States, creating all these war-torn, dysfunctional countries is great because all those places, you know what currency they use? U.S. dollar. all these places that we helped Israel destroy and turn into failed states, they all use the U.S. dollar. Iraq, I was looking at the other day. We fly in the dollars and we leverage control over the government. They sell their oil in U.S. dollars that's kept in an account in the Federal Reserve, and then our Secretary of Treasury decides where Iraq says this is what we want to spend our dollars on, and we veto or say what's okay or not. That's the situation Iraq's in. They sell we basically control their oil revenue completely, 100%. Like other places like Saudi Arabia, that are sort of our friends, we were more covert about it. But in Iraq, we're very direct. We owned Iraq because they used the U.S. dollar.
Basically destroyed a country. Syria, the U.S. and Israel worked for 15 years from Obama until this past year to overthrow the government. That was an active covert regime change operation. Iraq, the 2003 war and the debacle that lasted for years after that. And Iran was the last. So 6 of the 7 places are in chaos. And from Israel's point of view, great. We like chaos. That means we are the military hegemon for all of that region, stretching from Libya to Iraq. Chaos.
And the reason the United States loves it is because all of this region is dollarized and under our control. Here's an article. Iraqi's ruling pro-Iran bloc races to choose prime minister, while the U.S. rejects main candidates. Like, we're vetoing who Iraq puts in as its prime minister. And how are we doing this? Well, monthly transfers of U.S. dollars thrown into Baghdad in pallets of hard cash determine Iraq's ability to pay for basic needs such as salary, food, and medicine. So they sell their oil in dollars, and the money, when people buy Iraqi oil, they give the money to the United States, to the Federal Reserve, to U.S. Treasury, and then Iraq has to ask the United States for that money. And if we don't like their prime minister or who they're trying to choose as prime minister, we won't give them the money. And whenever Washington believes that Iraq is not aligned with U.S. regional goals, including enforcing economic sanctions on Iran, Baghdad's major trading partner and source of natural gas for electricity production, these fund transfers can be delayed or reduced. Yeah, that's one way we are fucking over the world.
Chaos is great. They can't get their act together. They're all in civil war. What could be better? The 7th is Iran. And that's where we're facing right now. And interestingly, when the war started, Netanyahu tweeted, "This is my dream come true," for 40 years. And I had to confess, I made a mistake. I always said 30 years because I dated it to clean break, 1996. But I didn't know Netanyahu before he was prime minister. I didn't know that he had 10 years more of dreaming of this war. So the off-ramp violates not only the American conditions of defending its imperial strength, but the Israeli dream of full control over the region. And that's why the off-ramp is so hard. I have to say one more thing, just because it is a little bit of a complicated picture. It's not incidental, and I don't want anyone to think I'm naive in this. When we talk about why the United States wants Iran within the U.S. empire, why it overthrew Mossadegh in 1953.
And remember what he said about the Shah of Iran and what a monster and puppet he was of the United States, and how U.S. media and Trump were trying to install the son of the Shah back into Iran. There's no public support for the son of the Shah. The Shah was hated, absolutely hated by the Iranian people. And you want to put his son back in charge?
Remember the oil. So I don't want to forget to mention that. That's not only a 1953 issue that was aimed to ensure that Iran would not take back its oil from British and then American interests. Trump absolutely, without question, no doubt, 100%, is as strongly beholden to the oil lobby as he is to the Zionist lobby. And he said so vividly, vocally in 2024. He said, raise $1 billion for me.
And the oil industry is connected to the deep state too, and the petrodollar, and it there's all these mechanisms that deep state has set up over the years to influence U.S. politics, and Trump is affected by them. They're too deep for him to. They gave money to his campaign. He's beholden to them.
It's a deal. You'll get all the benefits from this. What he did in Venezuela, he thought he was about to do.
By the way, what we set up in Venezuela was the same situation we have with Iraq. They sell their dollars, and the money from the sales of Venezuelan oil goes to the United States, and then we decide if Venezuela gets its own money. That's what we set up in Venezuela. It completely fucks over the Venezuelan people. Completely, absolutely fucks over the Venezuelan people. But that's what we managed to set up by capturing Maduro.
In Iran as well. So this needs to be understood as just one more piece of this. Yes, he wanted to fight with Iran for 46 years, at least since 1980, probably 47 since 1979. But what he thinks he learned from kidnapping the Venezuelan president and then suborning the Venezuelan government is, I can do a decapitation and then own the oil of that country. And so part of the motivation now was revenge, bring Iran back into the empire. But part of the benefit of bringing Iran back into the American empire is you get the oil. And he thought within one day he'll get the oil, because just like removing Maduro, he
wanted the same situation we have in Iraq and Venezuela, where Iran sells its dollars and the United States gets the money. And then we allow Iran, if they do what we want, to have some of the money that from their oil sales.
Thinks gave America Venezuela's oil. He thought killing the Iranian governmental leadership, starting with this religious supreme leader and then the top officials of the government that were meeting that day with the supreme leader, he would take the oil. So that's the tableau. This is why it's hard to take the exit ramp, because there were reasons for this war. To my mind, cruel, illegal, delusional. So I don't abide by any of those reasons, but there were reasons for this war. And taking the off-ramp means that none of those would be fulfilled. From my point of view, fine. None of them was valid. But from the point of view of the two architects of this war, Trump and Netanyahu, that's quite hard to do. But, as I said, the alternative, which is it's
impossible for Netanyahu and Trump to take this off-ramp, because it'd be political suicide for both of them, in Israel and in the United States. But they're not going to have a choice. What I said was going to happen is 2-3 months from now, the economic pain around the world would be so great that the rest of the world is going to cooperate and force the United States to capitulate to Iran. That's what's going to happen. That's how this ends. But you aren't hearing any of that yet. You aren't hearing like countries coming together and colluding to put pressure on the United States to force Trump to surrender. No, things need to get much, much, much worse before that happens. And so we're going to have the same current situation just continue on for a couple of months now.
An escalated war within a few weeks could destroy the world economy.
Thank you for that. That was...
Sorry to go
perfect.
on.
I loved it. I loved it.
I loved it too. And I think I'm going to stop here, because this will be a great little video just summarizing how the fuck we got into this Iran war. And this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.